Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military Summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the 13th of September of 2024. Today we have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first I would like to point your attention that for the previous few days we haven't been receiving almost anything from the Kherson direction, from Zaporozhye area. There are very heavy clashes right now, but everybody is, let's say, paying attention to the Pokrovsk direction or to the Kursk offensive or to the area in the vicinity of Chasiv Yar or the Toretsk, and this is exactly what probably somebody wanted to achieve, either the Russians or the Ukrainians, because now is the best time to start doing something interesting while your attention is focused somewhere in the Kursk area. It's the best time to begin some offensive or some special operation in the completely opposite part of Ukraine. And as for the Kherson direction, completely opposite part of Ukraine to the Kursk offensive, today the Ukrainian sources published the video of how they were FPV droning the Russian forces in the vicinity of a small village by the name of Pokrovske, that located in front of the cities like Achakov, Dmitrievka, Dniprovske, and Ukrainians published a lot of videos of how they were FPV droning the Russian positions. And it's not just like one episode, one FPV drone attack on Russian forces. This is the number of attacks which confirms that Ukrainians something like conducting a clearing operation with the purpose to prepare the foothold, to prepare the Kinburn speed before possible landing operation. And I believe that Ukrainians are planning to land their infantry in this part just to achieve some media victory, just to have something before possible peace negotiations between Russia and Ukraine. And as you know, today Zelensky reported that he is ready for the peace summit, the second peace summit that will take place in November. And according to Zelensky, Russia will be presented in this event. Now let's move further, and let's start with the South Donetsk direction, where the Russians continue their offensive operation. And according to information we have, the Russians managed to improve their positions to the west from the village of Prichistovka. They managed to capture these territories, these fields, and these tree lines. And currently the distance between the edge Russian positions and the positions of the armored forces of Ukraine is less than 1.5 kilometers, which means that during the next few days, most likely the Russians will make first attempts to answer the village itself. Now let's talk about Ugledar and the Ugledar direction. As you can see, we have lots of geolocations, lots of icons. First, I'll remind you that the first updates about the Russian attempts to answer and to take under control the coal mine South Donbas number 3 and to take under control the South Donbas number 1 started and took place somewhere 4 or even 5 days ago. But for the previous 3 or 4 days, we haven't been receiving almost anything about this direction, and today on the 30th of September we start receiving significant number of updates which confirms that the Russians, after a very long, let's say, or very short operational pause, resume their attempts to take the entire region under complete control. In this video, for example, we can see how the Russians were bombing and attacking the Ukrainian positions on the territory of the coal mine South Donbas number 3. This is obviously something like artillery preparation, and most likely either right now or maybe this upcoming night the Russians are going to take this territory under complete control. Also, we have the video of how the Russians were FPV droning the Ukrainians in this sector. In this video we can see the Ukrainian soldiers that were bombed by the Russian FPV drones. This video confirms complete control over this territory by the armed forces of Ukraine. Also, we have the video of how the Russians were bombing and attacking the city of Ugledar itself. A lot of artillery strikes, very heavy fire anomalies, lots of fire anomalies. This video confirms that the Russians maybe now, maybe during the upcoming night, are going to begin the full-scale offensive operation using broad frontline attack, not just in direction of the South Donbas coal mine number 3, but also in the direction of Ugledar. Or the Russians are trying to to make the Ukrainians think and to make a decision where to keep the main reserves, in Ugledar or in the coal mine, because the Russians will then decide where to attack, and obviously the Russians are going to attack exactly in the direction where the Ukrainians have weaker positions. Now let's move to the area of Kurakhova. This is the heart of the South Donbass, South Donetsk direction. This is the most important stronghold. This is the most important area of the armed forces of Ukraine in this direction. And today the Russian armed forces managed to break through the Ukrainian defense belt and to get as close as possible to the heart of the South Donetsk. Now let's discuss in details. Today the pro-Ukrainian sources published the video, more precisely the forces, the Telegram channel of the 46th Air Mobile Brigade published the video how the Russians were attacking the city or the village of Ostre. According to information we have, according to information that was provided by the 46th Brigade, the Russians introduced around 46 tanks and armored vehicles together during this attack, and of course significant number of personnel. And as a result of attack, the Russians managed to enter the village itself, or the city or the town, and to take under control the northeastern part. And now discuss this operation in details. First of all, different mappers shows that the entire the territory was captured by the Russians. The entire town, I guess, was captured by the Russians. And different pro-Russian sources reported that currently the Russians control just 50% of this small settlement and 50% remains under Ukrainian control. We are going to call it the entire village, the entire settlement, because most likely this territory was captured. Now let's talk about the situation from the beginning, and the operation of this breakthrough began somewhere on the 9th of September, when the Russian sources published the video how they managed to raise the flag in the most northwestern part of Krasnogorovka. I'll remind you, we have discussed this video. In this video we can see the Russian soldier that entered the most northwestern part of Krasnogorovka and raised the Russian flag. And as soon as the Russians managed to take under control this entire territory, the Russians began thinking how to take under control and how to encircle the Ukrainians who were located in this artillery pocket. And I'll remind you that this territory that currently is blinking right in front of your screen used to be under complete Ukrainian control. Of course, the Ukrainians realized that they are in a very big trouble. They are in a very big trouble and they need to begin evacuation as fast as possible and as soon as possible. And the Ukrainians began withdrawing their positions, moving during the days and at night and during the day in the western direction, trying to save as many as possible armored vehicles, personal carriers, equipment, and soldiers. And when the Russians managed to concentrate additional forces in the northwestern part of Krasnogorovka, the Russians began the full-scale offensive, that the video we've watched a few minutes ago, and the Russians were attacking along this road, and they entered the village and basically they cut the cauldron. Currently, we don't know for sure the exact number of Ukrainians that were encircled among the fields. Most likely, there are hundreds of Ukrainians who haven't managed to escape the cauldron. Most likely, during the next few days, the Russians will spend lots of time, probably the upcoming weekend, the Russians will spend to secure and to clear the territory. So we're also going to receive a lot of videos with significant number of prisoners of war and probably of Ukrainians who left there forever. And now let's discuss additional updates from the same direction. According to Russian military expert Ryber, the Russians managed to cross the Lazova River and to take under control farms that located on the Ukrainian side of the river. So this operation, the main goal of this operation is to take under control also another artillery pocket, another trap for the Ukrainians that located between the villages of Zhelana Persha, Krasnogorov, Kanitalovo. So we're talking about this part. And most likely during the upcoming weekend, the Russians will be able to take all these fields under complete control if the Russians are able to stabilize the situation in the vicinity of the farms. Most likely the Ukrainians will counterattack the Russians, and once again, if the Russians are able to repel every attack, then Ukrainians will speed up their evacuation and their, let's say, withdrawing operation. Now let's talk about the area between Ukrainsk and Gornyak. We haven't received almost anything from this area. As you can see, just one pro-Russian sources reported that as a result of clashes, the city of Ukrainsk was completely captured by the Russians. Currently, there is a securing and clearing operation on the territory of the coal mine. Furthermore, the Ministry of Defense of Russian Federation reported that as a result of clashes during the previous week, the Russians managed to restore control over the cities like Novogrodovka, Kalinovo, Memri, Galitsinovka, and Dalinovka. So this village was also, let's say, captured by the Russians, and today the Ministry of Defense reported this for the first time. Now let's move further to the area of Selidova. As you can see, we haven't received anything from this area, just a number of Ukraine FPV drone attacks and artillery strikes on the Russian positions. We see that this front line is getting more and more static and stabilized. For now, neither the Russians nor the Ukrainians are able to continue either offensive or counter-offensive operation. Currently, everybody is interested in stabilization the front line and not allowing, for example, from the Ukrainian side to move Russians further deep inside of Pokrov's direction, and the Russians are interested to dig in deeper and to prepare long-term defense positions. Currently, the main focus is taking place in the area of Kurakhova, and this is the major Russian direction for the till the end of the 2024. So summarizing everything, the Russians most likely by the end of 2024 will try to take everything that lays to the east of this red line under complete Russian control. So that's why first they will try to take the Kurakhova agglomeration, and then they will try to handle with the fields and probably to encircle the Ukrainians there if the front line will remains the same. Now let's move further. Let's talk about Toretsk, New York agglomeration. Different mappers reported that the Russians managed to secure New York completely. The Ukrainians, after successful unblocking operation in New York, managed to evacuate personnel and soldiers from a cauldron in the northern direction, and when the Ukrainians left their positions in New York, the Russians secured the territory completely. As for Toretsk itself, we have additional progress on the ground. The Ukrainian sources published the video of the 110th Mechanized Brigade was attacking the Russian forces inside of the city of Toretsk and around, and some of the episodes were geolocated, and one of the episodes took place exactly in this area. Based on this video, most of the mappers have adjusted their maps in Russian favor. Now let's move further. The Russians continue clashes along the Seversky Donetsk-Donbass Canal. I'll remind you that just a week ago, the Russians, as a result of offensive operation, managed to secure the territory to the west of Klishchiivka and to establish complete control over the part of Seversky Donetsk-Donbass Canal that located to the west of the village. Basically, by that operation, the Russians managed to split the territory in two, and now the Russians first decided to handle with the territory with Ukrainian positions that are located in the area of responsibility of the 5th Azov of the 5th Assault Brigade of the Armored Forces of Ukraine, between the villages of Ivanovska, Klishchiivka, and Seversky Donetsk-Donbass Canal. The Russian sources published the video, the Ukrainian sources published the video how they were attacking and FPV droning the Russians exactly in this point, which confirms additional progress on the ground. Most likely, as soon as the Russians are able to take under control everything in this part, they will turn their focus into the southern artillery pocket, and they will try to secure this territory. As soon as the Russians are able to take under control the entire Seversky Donetsk-Donbass Canal between the villages of Zelenopolye and the city of Chasov Yar, then the Russians will conduct multiple attempts to cross this canal and to begin offensive in direction probably even of Konstantinovka, and probably trying to encircle the Ukrainians in Chasov Yar. So something like this might happen during the next probably few weeks. Now let's move further and let's talk about the Sivers direction. The Russians continue bombing and attacking the Ukrainian positions, the main strongholds, the main artillery, the main fortification areas, but without any changes on the ground. So this is the regular behavior for this area. Usually the Russians are bombing this territory without any progress on the ground for another 3 weeks or something like this, and when we receive additional progress on the ground according to different mappers, and usually the progress is very huge. Most likely during the next few weeks the Russians will improve their positions along the railways, and finally we're going to receive updates about Russian control over Perezhny, and maybe the Russians will be able to enter the village of Zvanovka. There are very heavy clashes right now in this direction despite complete absence of any geolocations. Now let's move to the Kursk direction, and we got lots of very interesting updates exactly from the northern part. Let's discuss this territory, this direction details, because something big is happening right now. The Russian sources continue publishing significant number of videos of how basically reducing the entire territory to ruins, how the Russians are pummeling the northern direction with FABs, with significant number of FABs, a lot of explosions, a lot of casualties, of course, among the Ukrainians. So another video, this is another video published by the Russian sources. So what is happening right now in this direction? As I understand, according to the number of artillery strikes, the number of aviation that the Russians are using in this direction, one can say that this is the most priority target, the most priority direction for the armed force of Russian Federation, despite very heavy clashes in the Pokrovsk and in the Kursk areas. If we increase the numbers of updates since the beginning of September, we might see that the village of Petropavlivka was already reduced to ruins, and almost every single square kilometer was already attacked by the Russians, maybe twice and maybe even more. And today we start receiving first geolocations that confirms additional Russian progress on the ground. This is very important. Some pro-Russian sources reported that the Russians managed to establish complete control over huge territories between Sinkovka and Petropavlovka, and basically to answer the village of Petropavlovka. Let's add additional polygon to the map for better understanding. So once again, according to different mappers, these territories were captured by the Russians for the previous probably 2 weeks, because somewhere 2 weeks ago the Russians reported about complete control over the village of Sinkovka, and now the Russians managed to achieve additional results, additional success to break through the Ukraine defense belt and to enter the village of Petropavlovka. We have video, and this is the video, and the videos have very poor quality, but I will try to describe the video to you. In this video we can see Russian soldier that the two Ukrainian soldiers were trying to capture, and the author of this video reported that the Russian soldier activated grenade, and he put grenade below himself, trying to wait when the Ukrainians will come closer, and then he will turn on his back and grenade will explode, and of course he would have heroic death or something like this. But the Ukrainian soldiers realized that something is wrong with this situation. They decided to make few steps back, and we understand how exactly this entire situation finished. Anyway, the situation with attempt from the Ukrainian side to capture Russian soldiers took place exactly in this point. So obviously we understand if the Russian soldiers was exactly in this point, that means that probably everything that located to the north of this position was already captured by the Russians. Currently we don't know for sure how exactly to change the color. Maybe this is just a small road between Sinkovka and this point. Maybe all these fields, all these forests, all these I don't know, constructions along the railways were captured. So we are waiting for additional updates, and as soon as we get additional clarification we will change, of course, the map in Russian favor. Anyway, and the most important, the Russians moved further in the southwestern direction from Sinkovka and entered the village of Petropavlovka, which is already the outskirts of the city of Kupiansk. Now let's move further and let's talk about the Kursk direction, where the Russians continue their offensive operation. And currently, and according to different sources, the Russians managed to establish complete control over the village by the name of Tolstoy Lug, that located to the south of Lyubimovka. The Russians managed to enter the village of Lyubimovka, and there are very heavy clashes right now between the Ukrainians and the Russians. And according to information we have, the Russians managed to enter the village of Darina and to secure the territory completely. So we haven't adjusted the map because we don't have any confirmation from reliable mappers, or we haven't received any video that can confirm this, but obviously we believe that something like this is happening right now in this direction. As for the geolocations, we have just one video, and in this video we can see how the Russian soldier raised the flag in the village of Snagast, which confirms complete control over the territory. Furthermore, we continue receiving updates how the Russians are attacking and destroying the Ukrainian vehicles in the Kursk direction. Lots of tanks, lots of armored vehicles were attacked and destroyed by the Russians. The Russians continue bombing and attacking this territory with FABs. Additional batch of FAB 500s, FAB 1500 arrived on the heads of the armored forces of Ukraine. The Ukrainians suffer significant losses, and currently I'm not sure what the Ukrainians are going to do next. The Ukrainians during the previous days decided to stabilize the situation by beginning their own offensive operation in direction of Glushkova, and we have lots of geolocations and a lot of videos confirming this. For example, in this video we can see how the Ukrainian engineering machine was clearing the attack road for the armored forces of Ukraine, and a few probably hours later we got another video how the Ukrainian tanks and how Ukrainian vehicles were moving towards the village of Vysole. So the quality of video is very poor, but the author of this video claims that this point is Ukrainian vehicle that was heading towards the village of Vysole. And later we got unconfirmed report that the village was completely captured and secured by the Ukrainians. So let's wait for additional updates, and if we will receive some, of course we will change the map, but for now this might be just wishful thinking and speculation. The Ukrainians continue controlling the river of Seine because the Russians, despite the fact that the Russians created a significant number of pontoon bridges, some sources report that they managed to count up to 20 bridges along the river. The Ukrainians control every single road, and the Ukrainians try to attack every single equipment that they see along the river. In this video, for example, we can see how the Ukrainians managed to discover the distance mining equipment, and as a result of strike, the equipment was destroyed. As for the eastern flank of Sudzha, the Russians are bombing the territory heavily with FABs. So they try to, the main purpose of this attack, of these massive attacks, is to pin down the Ukrainians and not to allow the Ukrainians to redeploy reinforcements and reserve from the eastern flank to the western flank. This is the first purpose, and if the situation continue developing in the western flank so bad, then the main purpose of these strikes from the Russian side to keep the Ukrainian forces and to force them to stay on the ground and to encircle them as many as possible. Because if let's return back a little bit, one of the most important direction of Russian attacks in this area is Russian attack towards the village of Darina. And obviously if the Russians are able to continue moving further, they can take under control the village of Sverdlikova and to get as close as possible to the villages of Gogolivka and Rubashinka. So once again, if the Russians somehow are able to take under control these huge territories, at least with the sabotage and reconnaissance group, there are very high chances that the Russians will be able to encircle the Ukrainian forces in this direction and to create not the Kursk offensive operation, but to create the Kursk cauldron with the significant number of the armed forces of Ukraine inside of this territory. And after that, the Russians can force the Ukrainians to begin negotiation process, obviously in Russian favor. And as for the prisoners of war, as for the negotiations today, a new prisoner exchange between Russia and the Ukraine took place on 49 for 49 formula. The previous similar process occurred on August 24 when 115 Russian servicemen returned to Russia. According to some sources, the released Russian soldiers included those who fought in the Kursk direction. We are talking about conscripts. And that's it for today. Military Summary channel reminds you we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.